does help us out. And then finally, I want to thank all of our members for being here, and just wanted to say that if you're not a member, please consider joining the Los Angeles Center of Photography. We are a nonprofit organization, and we do depend on your membership to keep these programming going. And there are a multitude of benefits that go along with being a member of the Los Angeles Center of Photography. And that being said, I am going to turn this over to our fabulous Director of Operations, Brandon Gannon. Brandon, how you doing out there?
Mr. Jason Woolfolk, I am doing extremely well, my friend. And you're doing good?
Any better, I'd be twins, I think.
That is Jason Woolfolk. He does an outstanding job for us in producing all these events. Many of you have probably already seen him, known to love him. He's a mensch. Appreciate everything that Jason does. Thank you, Mr. Woolfolk.
My pleasure.
As Jason mentioned, my name is Brandon Gannon, a Director of Operations and Education here at the Los Angeles Center of Photography. I would like to take a moment. I do have a couple announcements, but before that, I'd like to take a moment just to recognize our staff and give thanks to our staff. Julia Dean, our Executive Director, is here. Yay, thank you, Julia. And we also have a new member of our staff, Matthew Finley, who is also here. He looks like he's got the video. There he is. Hey, Matthew.
Hello.
We just brought in Matthew as our administrative assistant for our online learning program, who helps out on our weekends. We're lucky to have him. Thank you, Matthew. Not here tonight, but also like to thank is Kevin Weinstein, Janice McGavins, and Sarah Hadley. It rounds out our Magnificent Seven staff. So thank you all to our staff. Also, Michelle Elkins, who is on our board, is here this evening. I'd like to thank Michelle for being here. All right, so I just have a couple announcements, and then I'm going to introduce our moderator here for this evening. First of all, we have a call for entry for our 5th annual Fine Art exhibition. The theme is called Exploring Humanity. We've extended the deadline for this call to Monday, October 5th. And the juror is Marissa Caicholo. She's the founder and curator of Building Bridges Art Exchange in Los Angeles. So Jason is going to post that link in the chat feature for you all. And feel free to enter for that. Again, the deadline is Monday, October 5th. Second announcement I would like to make is regarding our 5th annual fundraising gala, which is set for Saturday, October 24th of this year. The theme is A Love Letter to LA. This is going to be a virtual online experience. We've hired a creative Hollywood team to produce this event. We're very excited about it. This year, we're honoring Douglas and Francoise Kirkland with the 2020 The Stieglitz Award for their contributions to the photographic community. We're also featuring a segment from the Los Angeles Times photographers, and we're highlighting LA-based photographer Esteban Oriol. And there's going to be other activities as well. We'll have a lot of great artwork that's going to be up to bid on, and we're using Artsy to host this. So we encourage everyone to come to this event. If you're a member, you can get in for free. And Jason is also going to post the link to that event where you can get your tickets. And again, that's on Saturday, October 24th. All right, so the Say What You Want to Say series, this is the 6th and final chapter for this particular series. We are going to offer versions of this again in the future. It's gone incredibly fast. I want to take a moment just to thank all of our exhibiting artists for being in the show and partaking in the show. Patrice Fisher, who's here, thank you, who also talked last week. I also want to thank all of our moderators for taking the time out of their schedule, for doing an amazing job facilitating each evening. We really appreciate it. Tonight, we're thankful to have 3 of the artists, Adrian, Muna, and Ed. Thank you all three for being here. Ebarinix is going to officially introduce you, and we'll be seeing your work here pretty soon. I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening. For those of you who don't know Ebarinix Perello, he's a multi-talented man. He's a photographer, he's a writer, he's an educator, and he's also the host and producer of the Candid Frame podcast. This offers intimate and thoughtful conversations with photographers talking about photographic life. If you haven't checked out the Candid Frame, I highly encourage you to do that. It's an amazing podcast. Ebarinix, labor of love for him, and he's working very hard on it. Please do check that out. It's the Candid Frame. As I mentioned, Ebarinix, he's a terrific educator. He's been faculty here for the Los Angeles Center for Photography for many years. He is scheduled to teach a couple classes later this fall for us. One is a webinar. It's called Street Photography, Discovering a Personal Style, which will be on October 24th. Jason's also going to post the link to that in the chat feature. And then later in November 21 through 22nd, he'll be teaching a weekend workshop called Working the Streets, a weekend on street photography. And Jason will also post a link to that in the chat feature. Lastly, I just want to mention, if you haven't heard Ebarinix speak, he has an amazing voice. It's very soothing and relaxing. Perfect moderator and a perfect for the Zoom environment. So among his many talents, much better at speaking than me. Great voice. Let's give a warm hand and welcome our moderator this evening, Ebarinix Perello.
Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate that. And thank Julia and all the staff at LACP, my second family in LA. And thank you for the opportunity to to present these artists. And we're just going to jump into it. Each is going to do a short presentation on their work. And once each of them is done, we'll have just a little bit of a conversation. But if you have any questions at any point, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll pull from them. And either I'll read the question, or we'll allow you to be able to ask the question of any or all of the artists. We're going to start off with Adrian Octavius Walker. I just love how that name sounds, I got to tell you. Sounds like it should be a character in some classic play or something. But he's a mixed media artist based currently in Chicago, using both film and digital. His work is inspired by various aspects of what it means to be Black in both physical, mental, and spiritual ways, as well as being represented by Part 2 Gallery in Oakland. His commercial work has been used by Adidas, Apple, Humboldt Arts Foundation, and Martell Cognac. And with that, I introduce Adrian. Take it away.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Thanks again for the introduction. I appreciate the name. Shout out to. I don't know what my mom was on when she threw that Greek name in there, but it works. Yeah, so my name is Adrian Octavius Walker. I'm based in Chicago. I spent some time in LA. I mean, not in LA, in Oakland. And also like just visited LA a lot. I did some stuff for the Lucy Foundation a couple of years back. So I definitely miss LA, and I really am honored to be here with LACP and the rest of the artists. I appreciate you all. I'm looking forward to hearing you all speak. I'm going to go over some of my most recent projects. And I think you say we have 10 minutes, but I may end up flying through this or whatever. So just kind of bear with me. I'm not going to talk too fast. I'm just going to go over some of my most proud work. I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Let me know if you all can see my screen. Can you all see that?
Again, yep, yes.
Let me see if it works. If I just hit next and go, okay, cool. So, the introduction was already there pretty much. One of the most proud moments with my work now is one of my photos. I guess I'll get into it too, but one of my photos was selected to be at the National Portrait Gallery at the Smithsonian. So I'll get into that also. So that's like my biggest like claim to fame today. And hopefully that goes further. Um, this photo here, this is kind of like a part of like a new series that I'm doing. I'm gonna talk about that at the end. So I want to get into Mortal Man. This is the work that I featured with LACP, and the body of work is it was inspired by the artist and sitter that was in the photos. His name is Basil Kincaid. For you all, like, you definitely should look up this person. He's an incredible artist out of St. Louis, Missouri. Um, and the work from Mortal Man basically stemmed from the conversation that Basil and I had, and then it went into like an actual artist talk that Basil had. And so it explores the issues around death and self-destruction while portraying the journey of emotional. Give me 1 second. Can I move this around? Okay. Give me 1 second. Sorry. All right, there we go. And I'm not gonna read all this. You all can read this. So basically, like, I had this thing with Basil. We never like we knew each other, but we didn't meet each other like in person. So Basil had this work that was showing in Oakland, and a lot of Basil's work is around like death, and we have these serious conversations centered around like death and like believing and all this. And I shared this story with Basil basically about how when I was younger, I would often like cry thinking about death and what death meant, and not knowing where I was going to go afterwards and stuff like that. And he basically was telling me how the quilts that he make are embodied and around and centered from past relationships, people who he was close with, like his grandma and grandpa who like died and stuff like that. And he shares this thing about death and how like pretty much everybody who was surrounding him as an artist growing up and stuff like that are like a part of his life with his works. And he takes those quilts and he makes these like amazing like pieces. And so I photographed Basil, and like I said, like this, as I was photographing him, it felt like we were having like this conversation that I did. Like, it reminded me of a conversation I had with my mom. My mom passed away when I was 10 years old, and we talked about death or whatnot. And funny that we had this conversation centered around death because like these quilts that he says, like laying and being around these quilts, it's like one of those things for him. It's like things like having conversations with the people that are no longer with him. And so like me photographing this, it was kind of like, it was really strange because it was like really emotional at the same time, but there's like a conversation amongst like our ancestors like with us, which made this work like really like crazy. And I didn't know what I was going to like do with the work. I didn't know I was going to show the work. It was like really personal to the both of us. Even though like this work here, this is like actual his exhibition behind him. I didn't know if I was going to show this work because one, I thought it was kind of like odd that I was like making work from works that he had just put up. And then two, it was kind of like I didn't really want to tell this story because it was like a really personal story to me. And like basically after conversations with my wife, it was kind of like it was basically like me breaking through the wall of like this thing I had, like dealing with like death and like just kind of like having like these anxieties around it. And basically like my upbringing, I was like I was really like a kid that was like really just involved and like wanting to know like the next story and the next story about the person. I was like the kid that actually talked to strangers. Like I'm sitting on the bus stop or whatever, and I'm like asking this homeless person, like, how did you get to this point? You know what I'm saying? And like a lot of friends when I grew up, it was like actually like homeless people, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm having these conversations with people that folks walk by all the time. And so it was just kind of like one of those things where I was just like always just like this curious child and just like really wanted to know more about that person. And that's kind of like how me and Basil got to the point that we got. And this work right now is actually on view with another gallery. I dropped these links in afterwards, where it's like an actual virtual show, like a 3D show. And I have another piece that with this piece with the hands clasped together, it's going to be in St. Louis. So like that particular photo, this particular photo is called Paint of Passion. The reason why I call it that and I focus on Basil's hands because Basil's hands go through a lot of work building out these quilts. You know, Basil has like over probably thousands of quilts and works from pretty much like everywhere. Like I said, these quilts come from t-shirts people wear, uh, family and friends, like their pillowcases and stuff like that. So like I said, like a lot of this work that he touches, and it's kind of crazy to think about quilts and like people's clothing and stuff like that now when it comes down to COVID, because it's kind of like one of those things where he didn't necessarily have to like think about touching these items and like making them, you know what I'm saying? And like this is like stuff also with Basil, like literally like kind of like pick through different clothing, like you know those. I don't know if you all have them in LA or wherever city y'all live, where people donate clothes to those like canisters outside or whatever. Like sometimes Basil would come across those and they would pick through because you know the homeless folks probably like pick through them and stuff like that. And he would like literally go through that to like gather like clothing and items and stuff like that to make these quilts. And so we also like had this conversation about touching things, you know what I'm saying? And like not necessarily having to think about like this actual thing that's going on where people like being really, really careful about touching stuff of that nature. So it's kind of like it took away like for right now, like he kind of like paused on making quilts, not because of COVID, but mostly just kind of like revisiting and thinking about his interaction with these quilts and like basically how he goes along with talking. I mean, how he goes along with making these things. And that kind of like sparked a conversation about us and like how, as a photographer making work now, it's not like you can be like really close and intimate with that sitter as you once was or whatnot. Like having conversation now, it's kind of awkward. You all wear masks or something like that, or the photographer wearing a mask and stuff like that. You really can't. You can be versatile and talk, but it's kind of like you're muffled and you're really not being able to like read this person's lips and really like be there with the person. And pretty much that's kind of like how like I work in like photography and these different mediums. It's kind of like ultimately having a conversation with my sitters. It's not all about just the work. It's mostly about like, what did you eat this morning? Or something like that. What music you like playing? It's stuff like that, like really creating a vibe. And that's pretty much how I was able to really get these photographs of Basil, because Basil is a really sensitive person. He's well-traveled, well-versed, and we like really share a lot when it comes down to our works and stuff like that. But at the same time, during Basil's presentation, it took him a good 10 to 15 minutes to really get going because this work like really, really like touches him in a way. Like he was like in tears trying not to like, you know, he was trying not to hold back as much. But the joys of, I have a 2-year-old, my 2-year-old was in the room doing this talk. And I guess it was just like a spark in his eyes where it's like, here he is, this grown man, super like boo-hooing about this work. And his 2-year-old was literally not knowing what the hell he's talking about. And so it kind of like brought some joy to him. He was like, you know what? And my daughter's name is Emery. He said, Emery don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So I'm gonna talk to Emery. And so it was like that, like joys of him and seeing like this child and able to like literally talk to her, even though like the audience was there. He pretended like we wasn't there and he was just talking to her. So that's pretty much like a whole thing with him. And like I said, these images for me, it was kind of like some of the last work I had created around the time. This was like 2019, actually, when I was like creating this work. And it was just like some of the like last works that I had. And I just kind of sat on it for a long time. And then, like you said, like COVID hit and I wasn't able to really produce and like print so many of them how I really wanted to, but I got a chance to show some at the MOAD in Oakland, California. And like I said, right now I have like a 3D gallery going on with this work, and I can share that link. And so I want to move into We Matter. Now this work is super special to me because this is the work I was saying like in the beginning of the conversation where I had gotten to the National Portrait Gallery. And We Matter actually started off with me photographing a do-rag line that's based in LA. It's called OG Royale. And when I was taking these images of my two friends, or when I not go into those images, I kind of got this other feeling, you know, it was four of us, no, it was five of us hanging out. We was on the rooftop. We were just basically discussing about just like everyday thing. Like Michael, this sitter right here, he's an actual model in LA. And he was basically just telling me about like him and getting gigs and all that type of stuff, and pretty much how he always wanted to photograph with me. And these photos were just going to end up on just Instagram as like photos for this do-rag line being sold. And once I got my film back and I was looking through these images, I was just like, man, this stuff, like, these photos kind of like, it's just telling some type of story here. And it just didn't really sit well with me, thinking that they were going to just end up like on some packaging or just kind of like on a website to like just actually sell his product. So I called my friend OCG, who is one of the owners of the Durag line, and I was talking to him about it. And it didn't even take like 5 minutes. It was kind of like like silence over the phone. And then I kind of heard like some sniffling a little bit. And I was like, dude, are you crying? I was like, are you crying? He's like, yeah, it's just kind of crazy. It's kind of emotional to hear somebody talk about their work and seeing like my work on top of them. And I don't really care what you do with the photos. You can do whatever you want. It's your vision or whatnot. We can think about what we're going to end up doing with them and all that, but you can just sit on them. So that's what I did. I took these photos in 2018. And I slowly started like printing them out, doing like some test runs and stuff like that. The one here with the green durag, this is called Black Virgin Mary. And this is the image that ended up being at the National Portrait Gallery Smithsonian. That came about because I was one of the select artists for the Outwin Boochover National Portrait Competition. This is the same contest that Amy Sherrill won back in 2000. I think it was 16. I think they do it like every 4 years or something like that. But she had one with her image of her painting of Michelle Obama. And so she was the one who presented the photos and stuff like that. So this was kind of like a whole thing. And actually, when I get out of here, you'll see my background screen is a solo show that I had at Part 2 Gallery. And this work pretty much just kind of like shares like the Black male beauty traditions of like pretty much how we look while wearing this garment over our head, and pretty much like being taken and looked at as a threat.
Adrian, I'm sorry to butt in, but we should move on to the next artist. If you can just quickly show this series, and then we can continue.
Okay. And so basically, like I said, this work was like, you know, showing like how we're looked at as a threat. And then like, you know, mostly now I'm looking to like get away from this work because it's like just one of those works that's kind of been shown like all over the place. And then upcoming work, like I said, this is just some stuff I've got coming up, some photos that I took of my dad and like my neighborhood where I'm brought up in St. Louis, Missouri on the north side. So looking to explore and investigate like the north side and East St. Louis as a whole.
Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Great work. Next is Ed Maximus, another great name. He's a Haitian-born photographer currently living in New Jersey and a visual artist. His work is a blend of both fashion and fine art. Though his work can be easily classified as fashion, his body of work, especially his project for Colored Girls, challenges ideas about beauty and the human form, especially with those that possess Black and brown skin. His work has been seen in publications including Allure, LUS, Essence, and Vogue Italia magazines. And Ed, the floor is yours.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, everyone. Adrian, your work is amazing, man. And I don't have a presentation like yours, but hopefully I'll say something that means as much as what you said about your work. So, all right. I'll go ahead and share my website. Like I said, I don't have a presentation, but I can talk about the work and also a little bit about my background. All right, can everybody see my screen? So this body of work for Color Girl, that's the one that I chose to exhibit with LACP. In the past 5 years, it's pretty much the one project that's been consuming my creative time. How we got started, actually, I think it's worth going back to my previous project before that. Because I always talk about how they are the same thing, just that both of them, I created them at different times. So let's go back a bit with Anatomy of Emotion. Right off the bat, I guess everyone can see that it's a nude work, which is something that I have to talk about too. So yeah, black screen. Okay, let it load. All right, this is on my website. If everybody want to go to it, that's fine. But this work, Anatomy of Emotion, I started it when I was actually living in Gainesville, Florida, like right after college. And it kind of started based, like after a breakup, and I just wanted to do something that would express how I was feeling. And back then, I was always interested in photography and also how photography portrayed the body and how the body portrayed emotion. So when I was doing this project, it was more like both therapy and also meeting people that were going through the same thing as me and also expressing those emotions on how I was feeling, going through what I thought was the worst part of my life. And then I moved to New York, and at that time I was still going through the same feelings, the same emotions, you know. But eventually things changed for the better, so I had to find some other work to create that wasn't as dark, that wasn't black and white. And I love color in terms of photography, but I always feel like most colored pictures that I see, the color itself is a distraction. I'm sure there's some amazing colored photography out there, and I appreciate it, but I often think of it as more so an aesthetic, like the same thing can be talked about in black and white. And that idea ended up getting changed throughout time, and my appreciation for color also, you know, grew, and I felt like it was time to explore that. And that's how my current project that we're here for, that's how it came about. So it was pretty much a color study. And I consider myself a reductionist. Like, if something is not needed, it should not be there in my work. And that's how I end up shooting a lot of nude photography. And also, I always see it as a challenge to create something in that nature, nude photography, to make it where it's not something that, as much as it came from the perspective of cis male, it's not something that's for the gaze of the male. You know, it's like this. I created it as a namesake for Black woman, and I wanted to express something that was beautiful about them, that's beautiful to them, and I wanted to show something that they can see themselves in. And like the ultimate goal I always said with that body of work was for my mom to look at it and see herself in it. And my mom, she is conservative and a church lady. And so it was important to me that I created something that part of her and part of every Black woman was in it. So at first, like I say, it was just a color study, then it evolved into that, how can I create a body of work that shows something that, you know, that's different than what you usually see online when it comes to the Black woman's body. Like if you go on social media, like back in the day, like in 2016, Tumblr used to be more popular. Like if you do a search for nude Black woman, most of the work that you see, it's like there's oil on the body and all that. There's, you know, it's made for men to be turned on. And most Black women, when they see it, it's not themselves. It's just a vision of someone else. And that vision is often sexualized. It's often politicized. So I wanted to create something that removed all those things from it and just show the essence, the beauty of the woman. And it's still a work in progress, but I feel like I've gotten there. And I've, like I say, my mom herself, like that's the utmost compliment. If she appreciates something that I do, that means the world to me. But also the people that I've worked with, I collaborate with, I can see that they treasure those pictures more than anything else. Like I still hear stories to this day, and for me, that's another thing that doesn't show in my picture is the experience of the person that's in it. Like that's one. Actually, I would say that's the most important thing to me. Sometimes I will do a shoot where the picture is just an afterthought, and more so the person that's in it, the experience that they went through, and the going back after a few years and talk to me and be like, oh, this was the best moment of my life, and I still have something for me to cherish it, which is the picture. Like those things make me cry. So and so that's how I perceive my work. And these pictures, like I say, there's a lot of stories in them, and every person that I've collaborated with, like I know those stories. We keep in touch, and I'm still creating work about them. Like one thing that I always want to be, and I can't because I don't know how to write, is an author. And I'm really bad at writing. And I see like photography and also painting and other medium as a way for me to create a whole story. And like this is the first chapter of a long story, a long journey for me. And I've been at it for 5 years. And I was supposed to close this chapter before COVID, and then it happened. COVID happened, and then I had to kind of slowly transition to something else. I'm not sure if you can see, you probably can't see behind me right now. Like I have some paintings, and these pictures are supposed to be the reference for those paintings, and those women's story. Right now, it's the highlight of the woman's like in yellow, and those women's stories gonna be told on canvases, and eventually it will be told on installations. And hopefully in a few years it can be told in a movie. So that's kind of how I perceive my work. It's an iteration process, and it's completely medium agnostic. Like whichever medium work, I will just use it to create with it. And also it emphasizes on collaboration with others and making sure that everybody that contributes to it feel like they contribute something that's important. And I'll just go through the rest of the pictures. I'm assuming a lot of people have questions. I have a few notes that I jot down that, okay. A couple of things actually. The name of the project for Colored Girl, and there is a play also for Colored Girl who consider committing suicide. And oftentimes I get questions about that. I'm sure I'll get one about it if I didn't mention this. The name come by accident, and it was just a straight on the nose name for Colored Girls, like literally a color studies, and it's just black girls. Ooh, for Colored Girls. And I didn't make the correlation about that until the third person that I shot for it. She's from Baltimore, and we used to talk on Instagram, and she hit me up and she's like, "Oh, I love the work that you're doing. It reminds me of this play, and now all those women are portrayed, and now create a safe space for them. And I would love to come to New York to shoot." And I look it up, and I'm like, "Oh wow, that's kind of like along the line of the same thing, except for the play. Like I still haven't seen the play, so I might like. That's one thing after 5 years I still need to accomplish. Like, but I wanted it to not influence so much of what I do, but I'm pretty sure that the influence still comes along the way, just through the universe. There's also a famous picture of one of my favorite photographers, Koto Bolofo, that everybody used to either tag me in it, considering it as my work, or they would tag my work with his name. So there's always that confusion. Like every month I had to tell someone that, no, this is not my work. And that was also an accident. And a couple months ago, I actually got to talk to him about that. And it's like, we're both doing the same thing, just creating something that portrays people in a beautiful light and is black. And it's like, this is something that's necessary, so keep doing it. And to me, that's as much as I don't look for validations and all, to me, it was important that he understood what I was doing, and that I also wasn't copying him, that he knows that. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. We should move on to Amuna now. But
yeah, I'll just
Ed's referring to his website. So some people may want to take a look there as we continue. But why don't you say a few words since we can wrap up, and then we'll move on to Muna.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure there's questions and I can hit some points that I missed, but going through it is just what it is. It's just a celebration of Black women and the true essence, being free, being in a safe space, and the people that's not part of it, then being able to see themselves in I hate to say subject, but my subject. So that's it.
Thank you, Ed. Next, Muna Malik is a multidisciplinary artist that uses photography, abstract painting, and interactive sculpture in her work that explores stories of women of color and women of color and refugees. She has been exhibited at the Northern Spark Festival, Artwork Chicago, and the University of Minnesota. Her recent sculpture, River to River, was on exhibit at Battery Park recently in New York City. So, Muna, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I think, Ed, you have to stop screen sharing in order for me to screen share. Thank you.
Done.
All right. So I'm just going to dive in, giving time frame. It's nice to meet you all. My name is Muna Malik. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I sometimes will choose whichever medium works best for the message that I'm trying to convey. And the short series I'm going to go through today are photographs that I took during the Los Angeles protests during this recent social uprising related to George Floyd. But as we all can kind of see, there's a lot of things that people are really upset about, from Breonna Taylor, obviously, to George Floyd, and soon be what's going to happen with the Supreme Court. And so, background on this piece or these works, I joined the protests because political engagement is very important to me, and I find that in order for our voices to be heard, we kind of have to be in the streets. My background, I'm East African and Yemeni. Somalia specifically. And so Somalia and Yemen are two countries that kind of have been built on the backbones of people protesting and fighting for their rights. And so this collage series is meant to combine very different types of imagery to try and convey the best descriptions of how people potentially feel when they're out in the streets. And so this very first one is of a fraternity member here in Los Angeles, and a woman right behind him kind of doing exactly that, protesting for what they feel is fair and right. And so my collage series like to play on the complexities between the world that we live in. And so I kind of put this imagery on the background of the skies to kind of represent how the issues that we're all facing seem so far away and hard to attain, but or maybe not the issues are meant to be attained, but change it seems so hard and far away, but it's also so fairly close. And we can continue to push to, rise to the skies that revolutions are kind of built on. Second set of images, this is actually a teacher here in Los Angeles that brought his two sons to the protests. And, their signs kind of say more than enough, but placing them with an arid desert kind of speaks to how, they're surrounded by a sea of people all seemingly fighting for the same reason, yet he kind of felt the need to express that he feels alone as a parent and how he's raising his sons and what happens to them each day that they walk out and are existing in America. And so placing them on this arid, like barren desert kind of reflects on the conversation that a lot of parents have to have with their young, particularly Black males. And so that's kind of the messaging that I wanted to invoke with this series. And same, so the rest of the collages, I'm trying really hard to be mindful of time. So I'll scroll through and we can definitely come back and speak to them. But I wanted to also speak to the Black existence in America, right? The vivid but arid desert, the strong and frigid mountain, being in the sky, open and free, yet having no solid footing. These messages are meant to evoke feelings of awe, but with an underlying sense of struggle connected to each person's different perspective, right? Black communities in America exist in like a precarious state, right? Folks are living in an economic desert or dealing with police brutality, yet we're told and are supposed to feel free now that slavery doesn't exist anymore, but we're still living in a state that isn't necessarily free for everyone. And so that's what this collage series is specifically meant to evoke, and using nature and environments that are oftentimes very far away from these city communities is another way to kind of connect with folks that may not be living the same existence or experience. And so that's the collage series, or some of the collage series. So I'll stop sharing my screen and dive back in. Sorry that was rushed. I just am mindful of the time. So.
No, thank you, and I appreciate that. Let me check. I don't think I have any questions in the chat as of yet, but one of the questions I have for all of you, which is kind of inspired by each of your works and your presentation, is this idea that that when a photographer of color decides to talk about their own Blackness, their own brownness, it's often been seen as a political statement, and I think that any photographer or artist doesn't differentiate between it being a personal examination and expression of their experience and a political one. Just being Black itself is political. But I'm wondering, as artists, how recent events have sort of colored how you have seen your work and the work of others. And I just kind of leave it open to ask any of you to respond to.
I think I mean, just as an artist, whether it's photography or sculpture, I personally feel that all of my work is political. The fact that I have the ability to be an artist is political in itself. Being a Black woman in America is very political. And I think a lot of the work I create is meant to have these conversations and highlight why whatever it is that I choose to produce is going to be fundamentally different to my white, particularly white male counterparts. And so that's just my take. I think Gordon Parks is who he is because of the fact that he was creating work at the time he was creating work, but also speaking specifically to the communities around him. And now we look back in a way that he captured an entire generation's experience in this country through his own lens and his own view. And I think that's like what art is meant to be.
Adrian, one of the interesting things in terms of your collaboration was the use of the quilts. And they have a long history in Black tradition and Black culture in terms of the connectedness to the ancestors in the past. And as much as that was a part of your collaborators' work, I was curious to see how you considered that in terms of the images that you created, because it was more than just photographing the artist with his work. You were doing so much more, but I was wondering specifically about that particular facet, about what impression that made on you as you were creating the work.
Yeah, I mean, it just made me think about like the past. I mean, everybody pretty much on this call probably had their favorite blanket growing up or something like that. So just kind of like taking me back there and thinking about like this artist that creates these quilts and these different symbols of work from like different folks in his life, and kind of chiming in with the question you had at first about like things being political or whatever. I think like just these things, like sacred things that touches the Black body as a whole, kind of like resonates with a lot of us. Even like kind of like having the camera. I can only like I've been on the grounds photographing like protests and stuff like that, and like so having like courage to be out there on the grounds is like a whole nother thing, because at the time when I was on the grounds photographing Ferguson, I can only think about anybody wanting something pointed at them. You know what I'm saying? And so the reason why I felt the way of photographing Ferguson, because I was actually from that area. You know, I went to school in the area and stuff like that. So to go back and think about photographing Basil with his quilts is one of those things where it's like, we kind of like found and gained like some trust for one another in the beginning of before even photographing. You know, we wasn't even going to like photograph. We were just basically just going to talk about these quilts and pretty much, but then he asked me, you know, how do you feel about photographing me with my quilts? And I was just like, I'll be honored, you know, let's just kind of make it out of a conversation. And kind of, that's kind of pretty much like where we took it. A conversation over these quilts, and then we just kind of made something happen from there.
Thank you. Ed, what's really interesting about your nudes is one, and you sort of touched on it, this whole idea in terms of the not idealizing the form, you know, but rather sort of presenting itself in its true honest form, flaws and all. But the use of the color to contrast that was really kind of fascinating. And I was hoping that you could share a little more about the choices with respect to that and what you found that it brought to our examination of the form and the skin and the color.
In terms of colors, like especially when I was I did put a book together like in 2017, and I started this project in 2015. And from 2017, when I was looking back at 2 years of work, and I look at the colors that I tend to gravitate towards the primary colors. And the most particular one would be yellow. And I think about as a kid, I used to read a lot of books. And the one way that I would remember things in books, and I'll just use my yellow marker and highlight specific parts. and especially science book because I was into science a lot, and I'll just probably highlight the whole page and try to remember it. So that's how yellow ended up sticking to me. It's still like the most effective color to highlight something. And when you put yellow against black skin, it makes the skin pop. And any shades of yellow, it creates something around the skin where you have to focus on it, like some light that it puts on the skin. So it's the whole idea of highlighting something. It sounds on the nose when you explain it, but it's effective at what I was trying to achieve. And even to today, like for some pictures from this project that I shot like 3-4 years ago, and I shot them on other backgrounds, and I'll go and Photoshop, remove the color and change it to yellow because I felt like it looked better in yellow. The point that I was trying to put across, it come across better in that color. So that's kind of how like my brain works in terms of that, in terms of colors. It's just what is the most effective way to show something. And sometimes like certain colors would create a distraction, and I don't use those pictures, especially when like I don't retouch the skin. I don't touch the skin at all. I would darken them at some time just because of censorship. To get away from posting it on Instagram and not having to blur anything, I would just darken the skin. But I still feel like that doesn't take away from the message, and it doesn't take away from the reference that I'm trying to set to build on something else. So, yeah.
I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but if someone has a question that they would like to ask live, you could just raise your virtual hand or your physical hand if you're on camera. Okay. This is a question for everyone. Part of being a person of color in this country, in terms of being able to speak about your experience, especially when it comes to speaking to a white person or a white audience, is contending with this issue of not only being able to just express how you feel, but also having to explain, to be an educator, sometimes having to justify your experience. And I think, you know, things have been opening up as a result of recent events, but as an artist, part and parcel of the creation of your work also involves you being able to, if not explain is not probably the right word, but to accompany your work with, you know, words that sort of describe the spark of inspiration, what the work is about. And I'm wondering about that facet about being a creative artist, how you see that considering the times that we're in. And that's for anybody to respond to.
Like one thing that, like especially recently, after the uprisings and COVID and everything that the Black community is facing today, where people from the outside are seeing more of it, and some people are coming to terms of there is a problem. I feel like there's this weight that is put on us Black creatives to actually teach other people on how to react to our work, and also teach them what our work should mean to them. And as someone like me who, like, I don't like writing words. It's just sometimes I create just to create. I don't need an artist statement to like attach to my work to tell you this is what it should mean to you. It's just you can process this however you want. And if it rubs me the wrong way, we can start the conversation. So, and I feel like that's comparing to white photographers and some of my counterparts, like they don't have to do that. They can just create free will. Like, but our work is just the idea of us being photographers to begin with, it's political enough because photography, if you look at its history, it creates so many conflicts. And like, just look at National Geography. A lot of us, the things that we know about Africa comes from National Geography. And if you look at all the photographers from National Geography, all of them white. So it comes from a white gaze. So it's just, at the end of the day, a lot of things that we know about this world come from the white gaze. And with us being part of this photography world, it feels like we have to push against that and have to create work that try to erase or correct like hundreds of years of history. And to me, that's a heavy burden on most of us. And oftentimes it also stifles us from creating work that we really want to create. Like, I want to be careful in creating work that means something just for me, as selfish as it sounds. Like, I don't have to create work that educates you or someone else. So that's kind of how I feel. I know it's just, that's how I feel. But yeah.
Thank you, Ed. Muna or Adrian, do you want to contribute to that? Okay. Well, as a final question to each of you, I'd love to hear a recommendation that you guys have for artists that you particularly have a passion for, that you're excited about their work, that you think our audience here should be turned on to. And Muna, why don't we start with you?
Wow, thank you. I will say he's not necessarily a photographer, but definitely does quite a lot of photography coupled with his paintings. But one would be Brian Blue. He's I think on Instagram he's called Blue the Great, or you can probably find him anywhere on the internet under Blue the Great. He's a Los Angeles-based painter, but I think he's actually got a great eye when it comes to photography and would be a good artist to check out.
Thank you for that. Adrian?
Yeah, my friend Lola Ibarra, her work is really, she does like sculptural art, photo manipulation. I can drop her Instagram, but she's based in Chicago, back and forth from Chicago and St. Louis. But I would definitely say Lola Ibarra. Her work is really, really phenomenal. And it shows like pretty much a lot when it comes down to femininity through sculpture, photo, and just in collage.
Thank you. And Ed?
As of like that question, if you asked me that a couple of days ago, it would change. So it change every day. But as of today, like one photographer that I really, really love her work, and I want to see her do everything out there. Her name is Kennedy Carter. She's from North Carolina, I believe. And there's just something about her work that it makes you feel alive. And she shoots film, and a lot of times film look the same when it comes to photography using it. But there's just that essence of the work that you can just feel it. And yeah, I'll put her Instagram or her name on the chat, but it's worth checking her out. And she's amazing. Yeah, Kennedy Carter.
It's amazing to hear both. I know Kennedy, I curated the show of Kennedy, and Moon, I know
Yeah.
Brian too. He's a good friend of mine. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your recommendations and thank you for your time. I'm sorry we had such little time in which to sort of dive deep into each of your work. But I really recommend that everyone check out each of these photographers and artists' website, and just to get a bigger and more satisfying taste of what they're doing, because I think they're all doing really amazing, personal, interesting work, and they really are an inspiration to me in terms of how they are exploring not only the existence of the greater community, but just their own perspectives and their own life experiences, and it really comes through in the work. So thank you again for letting me host, and I'll turn it over back to Brandon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ibarionix. Appreciate again you moderating, taking the time this evening. Just want to let everyone know that the online exhibition for Say What You Want to Say lives on our website. It'll live on there in a perpetuity. It will not go away. So anytime people want to check out the work from all the artists for this series, it will be available for you. I want to get a shout out here to Terrell Halsey, who is one of our participating artists who is here in the audience. I see him in here. And again, Patrice Fisher, who is also here. And I want to thank all of our 3 participating artists again tonight, Muna, Ed, and why am I trying? And I thank you all, Adrian, sorry, right. Adrian Octavius Walker. I don't know why I forget your name. That's a great name. But anyways, thank you all 3 for participating tonight. And as a reminder, what Jason said earlier, we are going to send out an evaluation for everyone. We appreciate some feedback. We really like that. So thank you all. Thank you, Jason. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.